the point of education is. And I was thinking about the data there is about how few kids who graduate, even graduate, less than half or half graduate at best from Chicago schools, and that's excluding the number who never make it into high school in Chicago. But even those who graduate, how few manage to get to four-year schools or get a BA? I think it's 3 or 4%. And it's that they're not prepared for the kind of intellectual flexibility, the kind of tough-minded, intellectual perseverance, really asking questions, thinking critically, that I think is essential for a democratic society. And I suspect it's even would be good for an economy, partly because politics and the economy overlap so much, as we can see these days. But I think we've bought into, and Arne Duncan has bought into, the worst parts of the business mentality or the business model. I think there are things we can learn from the business world, but accountability is not one of them. And I think we've bought into some of the shoddiest accountability mindset that in which everybody is forced to lie. You know, high stakes numbers means you play with the numbers. There's something I think in sociology called Campbell's law. The higher the stakes, the more corrupt the data. And Obama, I think, quotes data about Chicago's success, which I can't expect him to be an expert on, but I'm enough of an expert to tell you it's nonsense. And the test scores, NAEP test scores, which are the only test scores that are consistent around the nation, shows no progress in the last 7 years in Chicago. You remember we were preceded by another miracle worker in Chicago, Ballas, who's now producing miracles in New Orleans. And that's, we have one after another superintendent comes in and produces a miracle, just as the previous Secretary of Education before spelling Rod Page came in from Houston claiming that there was the Houston miracle, and before that there was the Texas miracle. And closer look at the data, it turned out to simply say it was somewhere between shoddy bookkeeping and lies. And I've engaged in that myself in the school business because it's so easy to do when we have such a narrow way of looking at school accountability. The kids who graduate our high school need to be kids who've learned to play with ideas. And that starts in kindergarten, who learn to ask uncomfortable questions, who are in the presence of adults who are used to asking uncomfortable questions.
Debbie Meier, I'd like to ask you whether you were surprised, both in terms of the teachers' union, both Randy Weingarten, the head of the AFT, and the head of the Chicago Teachers Union, both praised Duncan as somebody who at least is accessible and willing to hear them out.
I think they're being politically smart, which I don't have to be. And maybe they see something in these people that I don't know about. I mean, they're both possible that I'm wrong, and there's a possibility that they're being political. Are you still seeing me? Hello?
Yes. We see you just fine.
Okay. Okay, my screen went off. So part of that is, once you've posed the issue as being union lackeys or reformers, and the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, a variety of magazines, and as you mentioned earlier, have said there are two sides: union lackeys, people who who are worrying, who are dependent upon the union, and on the other side are real reformers. I think it made it hard for the union to speak for its own membership on this question. And the history of reform has almost nothing to do, I shouldn't say that. There have always been, I guess, a struggle between these two wings in reform. And but they have posed me as an anti-reformer, as though there are, since I'm not for market-style reforms, this testing mania, this narrow focus on prepping kids for a small selection of skills, that makes me a dupe of the union and a anti-reformer and someone who doesn't care for the future of the economy or democracy. I think it's been posed that way for so many years now.
I want to turn to Michael Klonsky for a minute. Again, speaking to us from Chicago, where Arne Duncan is head of the schools there, now been picked as Education Secretary nominee by President-elect Obama. He's a strong supporter of No Child Left Behind Act, called in 2006 for a doubling of the funds for it. What are your thoughts on that? And for people who really don't follow education policy issues, what's your assessment of No Child Left Behind?
Well, I don't think Duncan's really a strong supporter of No Child Left Behind. I remember when President Bush came out to Chicago and kind of cut a deal with Mayor Daley and got some kind of a tentative support for No Child. But I think Duncan's been pushing more for, like most big city superintendents, pushing more for kind of a loose application of No Child's most punitive aspects. In other words, he's been trying to get waivers for Chicago. He's been trying to get rid of the, I mean, he's really rejected the idea of moving kids out of schools. And so I have to give him that. Look, I think the real point is that we have an opportunity here to do something that the Bush administration has stopped us from doing. We need to put public back in public education, and I think Duncan, once he's kind of liberated from Chicago, I think could be a person who could do that. I think he's got to use the bully pulpit of the Department of Education to really promote support for urban public schools and for teachers. And I think we've got to get rid of No Child Left Behind's approach, which has been to really turn the Department of Education into a cash cow for politically aligned companies and have gone into the education business.
We're going to have to leave it there. Michael Klonsky, I want to thank you for being with us, Professor of Education and Director of the Small Schools Workshop and author of Small Schools. Deborah Meier, longtime school reform activist, now at the Steinhardt School of Education at NYU. That does it for the broadcast. Tomorrow's now produced by Mike Berkshire, Dokaду, Sarah Monte, Angela Comet, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us.